Good morning, and thanks for joining me here on the KOTA Territory Live Desk. This morning, we're bringing you Governor Larry Rhoden's first weekly legislative press conference of the 2026 session. This is taking place at the state capitol in Pierre. These briefings give the governor a chance to talk about what's happening at the Capitol, outline his priorities for the sessions, and take questions from reporters. Let's hear what he has to say.
That we'll prioritize when making these investments. We're also putting in writing formal processes to govern these investments. Each award requires a business plan to be reviewed by GOED and me. This includes key information and data on each project. Future fund grants will be awarded on a reimbursement basis. This will require receipt of itemized invoices prior to the payment. This is an important change to increase accountability for these funds. When feasible, GOED should require a matching commitment of some kind from the community or entity benefiting from the grant. Each agreement shall require a conflict of interest policy to be in place, and GOED will continue to be transparent and provide a report to the JCA. To be clear, much of this is a direct reflection on how we already do business today. This executive order is a promise of how I will administer the future funds. And with that, we'll turn it over to you for questions.
Governor, there's a lot of proposals with the property tax matter, and that's going to be a very big discussion for the 2026 legislative session. How do you think that you're going to be able to break through the noise with your half-cent proposal?
Yeah, I really do. I have a very positive feeling about the chances of that right now, especially the more I've got out, even last night, getting around to some of the socials and visiting with people on the street, the organizations. There is a lot of growing support for my proposal, and as I've seen more and more proposals come in, I've been more encouraged because there are a lot of proposals out that are completely missed the mark. And I think it was when we had heard a certain proposal here a while back, it took me about 10 minutes to put the numbers together as far as what it represented and how badly it missed the mark as far as providing relief to the areas that need it most.
On that property tax proposal, two questions there. One, how long did it take for you and your team to... Mike's. On the property tax proposal, two questions. One, how long did it take you and your team to sort of formulate that plan? You provided estimates in terms of what that potential revenue would look like. How long did it take you and your team to come up with that proposal? Secondly, what do you make of Dusty Johnson, who is also running for governor and who recently went on radio and criticized the plan and basically said that it doesn't take into account in-state tourism and that it effectively would transfer wealth from rural areas to urban areas? Thank you.
Well, I'll start for the first question. If you recall, that idea, that concept, we had come up with that very late in the session last year, and we'd even discussed then whether or not to bring that forward. We could suspend the rules and do this and that, and have potentially brought it forward last year. I made the decision that I wanted this bill to have a good process and see good process. And I've been critical of legislators and plans in the past when I was a legislator to introduce legislation in the last minute when you had to suspend rules, because then you're kind of violating the process of public hearing and open debate and discussion and vetting. And I wanted this bill to go through that. So I presented it to the Property Tax Task Force. They reviewed it, but it was kind of set up to the side, and that was all right. I just wanted it to be out there. So we made the decision to bring it forward as a governor's bill. On the other part of it, that makes no sense. as far as Dusty's argument that this bill, because quite frankly, that's what I was referring to when I was talking about bills that missed the mark. I run the numbers on the three counties that arguably need, that have been the hardest hit. I think it's a fact. You could say that Pennington, Minnehaha, and Lincoln County had the biggest impact on their owner-occupied. Under that proposal, they would see about an 8% reduction in their property tax on owner-occupied. Under my proposal, it was, what was it, 50%? No, yeah, 50%.
It varies by county.
Yeah, well, it was actually, in those three counties, it was from 75 to 94%, but that was just on the portion of the county's portion. But they would see dramatic results and reduction under my proposal relative to, and it wasn't just Johnson that proposed that. I think Hansen had also. They were scuffling back and forth on whose idea it was, so they can scuffle all they want, it misses the mark.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd just add one other point on the idea of the shift from rural to urban. You know, you pay sales tax where the incidence of the sale occurs. So if you go to a store, you pay where the store is. If something is delivered to your home, you pay it at your home, where your home is. You know, more and more, there are very few things that you actually have to go somewhere to buy. And so every person makes a decision about where and how they want to shop, and then that's where they pay the tax. If you're a person who wants to pay I'm from Armour, it's a town of 700 people. If you want to pay sales tax in Armour, shop in Armour, and have things that you can't buy there delivered to your home. There are very few things that you can't have delivered these days. That's a decision you make. If you go to New York City for vacation, you're going to pay sales tax in New York City. That's a decision. I mean, a key distinction between the governor's plan and the others is having local decision-making. And it is actually taxpayer decision-making in this case. You control where you pay sales tax by where you shop.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes, sir.
John Holt, South Dakota Searchlight. I have a question about the Future Fund executive order. Obviously, the next governor could undo that, right? I'm curious to know how you would feel if a bill came forward proposing exactly these safeguards. Would you support that or not, and why?
Well, you know, I hate to commit on hypotheticals, but I don't know why it wouldn't. If there was a bill exactly with the exact language, I don't know why. What would cause me any concern whatsoever? Because that is a commitment. It's an executive order that I'm placing on myself. So I don't see how it would have any more effect or less to see it as legislation.
Joe Sneevy, Dakota Scout. Following up on that, can we take this executive order to be an acknowledgement of the, for lack of a better term, anti-economic development sentiment that we're seeing among legislators? Or, you know, an olive branch to show you hear them, and this is your response to that?
Well, I think it, as I stated, for the most part, this is exactly the way we've done business, and I support what we've done in the decisions we've made in the past. In my view, the executive order, I think is just to put in writing and give the legislators a comfort level. This is what we're looking at when we're making these decisions on future fund projects.
Yeah, and I would add, the important thing about the future fund is that it's flexibility. You have a number of different funding sources for economic development. Some of them require levels of approval. You need to have a tool that is flexible and that can act quickly. And I think a positive thing about the future fund is that there is one person who's accountable. the governor. It's not the governor in some committee, it's not the governor in some board, it's not diffused across a lot of people. There's one person calling the shot, and if you like a grant, you know who gets the credit, and if you have questions about the grant, you know who to talk to about it. It's one person. So there are bills that would say, oh, this board or that board. I actually see that as taking a step back in terms of holding people accountable. This order is really about transparency. As the governor said, a lot of this is codifying our current, not codifying, but putting in writing our current practice. And it's transparency. If people wonder how we're using the future fund in this administration, now they can look at this and they'll know. So is that an acknowledgement of someone who wondered how we were using it? I guess you could say that, but.
Well, maybe more so than an acknowledgement, like a push back, like, see, this, we're doing this above board. And this, we've just laid it out here in writing.
Yeah, I don't know if I understood your question, but we're not pushing back on anything. We're just trying to provide a comfort level for the legislators and the people of South Dakota that here it is, folks. This is how we do business, and this is the process we go through when we're making these decisions.
Yeah, Governor, I know during your State of the State, you talked about hosting a series of town halls on property taxes. What are you hoping to learn from those? Could you see additional policy being developed from some of the insight you might get from those hearings?
Well, certainly. You know, I think my Open for Opportunities tour was kind of an eye-opener for me at just the value of getting out in the public and on the street and talking to the citizens. We have such a unique situation in South Dakota to begin with. You know, we're a small state. I hear it all the time when people talk to me about how it just doesn't happen in other states, that they just come up and have a casual conversation with the governor. So we have, and my predecessor used to talk about all the time about being in South Dakota. Some people think that it's a disadvantage to be such a small state, and it really provides us a lot of opportunity to be nimble and responsive, and to get out and hear the people and hear their suggestions and their ideas. That coupled with a legislative process that I think is second to none in the nation as far as just the balance. A citizens legislature, they come here and they work for 37 days, and then they go home and they live with the laws that they passed. I think that all that leads to a system of really sound, responsive government, and this is an extension of that, to get out across the state. People, if they want me to hear them and their ideas, that's great.
You brought up your predecessor. I do want to just follow up with one quick question. I know yesterday articles of impeachment were introduced against Kristi Noem. You, on your personal page, posted a message of support for Secretary Noem. Can you describe your support for her and what you make of this impeachment effort?
Well, I think it's a radical left trying to make noise again. I think it's unmerited, and it kind of makes me smile when somebody takes on Kristi Noem, because just like I said in the tweet, she's the toughest person I think I've ever worked around, that I've ever known. And if you think she's going to back down or cave into that kind of pressure, they don't know Kristi Noem. Yes, sir.
Don McDosh with the Argus Leader. Governor, I've talked to one opponent so far on the sales or the property tax proposal. Senate President Pro Tem Chris Carr.
Who is it? I'll go get him.
Chris Carr. He said he described it. His critique was that it wasn't good tax policy because it would kind of create winners and losers between obviously property owners and those who rent or otherwise don't have homes. For those who are opposed for those reasons, that this would impact renters perhaps, that they would end up paying, kind of footing the bill for property owners. How do you plan to respond to that / maybe win those potential opponents over?
Well, I think the most pertinent response is this is totally up. I think it's government at its best is, government's closest to the people. And it's up to those individual counties and the people in those counties to decide. And we left, as much flexibility on that as we could. If the county commissioners enact this, it's referable to a vote of the people. If the county commission doesn't enact it and the people think they should, they can initiate the process or they can vote it out. It gives them complete authority at the local level to make the decision that's best for them.
We're gonna go to the phones really quick, because there's a few people on the phones, and then we'll come back to the room. So if there's anyone on the phones that wants to ask a question or two, now's the time.
JP at KON News Radio.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Governor. Thank you very much. So what are your thoughts on recognizing EMS as an essential service?
Do you understand what? Yeah, what are you getting at? Recognize EMS as an essential service?
Yeah, I believe at this point, if it's not recognized as an essential service, it's a matter of funding from the state, a possibility of getting some funding from the state.
I have Laura Ringling, who's kind of my healthcare expert, and we're not, I really don't know what,
I think he's saying
I'm not familiar with what you're asking.
It's kind of like, it's an optional thing, so like, a lot of EMS services, they're like self-funded, within like certain districts, and if you declare it as an emergent, or like as an essential service, then it requires like more state funding, if I understand where he's getting at.
Ambulance services, basically.
I think, JP, maybe we're getting hung up on the idea that this essential service is some kind of a state distinction. This is an issue this session. There was a summer study on it. Traditionally, these EMS services have been locally driven nonprofits, or they have various structures. A lot of them rely on volunteer EMTs, especially in rural areas, and that's becoming less viable. There are some bills this year that are geared at changing that to give more flexibility, like so you can have a nurse on the ambulance instead of an EMT, and that's something that we're going to be continuing to look at. A long-term question is probably the whole funding model, and I think that's what you're getting at, but there's a lot of ground to cover on that topic before we get there, I think.
Thanks, JP. We'll come back to the room and can finish up with 2 more questions here in the room.
Good.
Thanks, Jackie Hendry, SDPB. I have a couple questions on the Rural Health Transformation Program. First, if you could just remind folks or summarize how the state got to some of the decisions in the narrative and programming and how we're going to be using those funds. And second, if I've had some questions on if these, block grants basically from the federal government are intended to replace a loss of ongoing funds at the federal level and kind of the intention of the program, if anyone could speak to those two.
Well, I'll just take a brief stab at it and then turn it over to Laura. Obviously, she's a resident expert on the Rural Transformation Fund. I think we went through a very good process in South Dakota, and I was pretty proud of our team for the way that they got out and got a lot of input from a lot of different organizations. Laura can touch on that and some of the process they went. And we were careful to use these dollars for what they were intended, to expand and enhance our healthcare situation in rural communities across South Dakota. So this is, in my view, a lot different than some of the federal programs they've had. And my wife and I, when we were at a conference, 8 months ago, had one-on-one conversation with Dr. Oz when we were on the front end of this, and really encouraged by what I heard from him and the vision that President Trump had for this program. So, Laura, why don't you come up and you can talk a little more about details about what that process looked like.
Sure.
Thank you, Governor. So when we found out that this program was created through HR1, we began stakeholder engagement. We worked starting in late August to meet with our three major healthcare systems, South Dakota Association of Healthcare Organizations, and at the same time, we released a request for information through the Department of Social Services so that we could receive broad feedback from anyone that wanted to provide it. In conjunction with that, through September and October, we held community conversations in 5 different communities across the state. We were in Pierre, Yankton, Rapid City, and Eagle Butte. We had those community conversations to hear themes from the locals in the community to understand what they wanted. And from all that input, we came up with 4 initiatives, or 4 pillars with 10 initiatives, and they're focused on connecting technology and data for a healthier South Dakota, advancing our rural workforce, keeping our healthcare access local and strong, and then transforming our systems for sustainability.
Dakota Scout, Joe Sneevy. Governor, you are in the middle of an election as well. I think I wrote that there's going to be proxy wars. You've acknowledged that this could be a messy session with the politics infiltrating lawmaking. I think we saw that right out the gate with, I think we had a question about Congressman Johnson's reaction to your state of the state. He kind of threw some shade at you, said you had no vision. Would you like to respond to that generally?
Well, I don't know exactly what to say. Obviously, we laid out a pretty strong vision, I think, and you know, I think even some of the article you wrote about national defense and that being the next big industry in South Dakota, and I'm pretty excited about that vision in and of itself because that fits South Dakota so well. You know, we talked about I'll use that as an example because I think it's huge if you're looking at vision. We have the potential in South Dakota to take advantage of our assets. We produce so much food in South Dakota. Like I said in my statements, food security is national security. And that alone lends to the vision of how appropriate it is for us to capitalize on our strengths. The amount of renewable energy that we produce in South Dakota, the potential for us to produce so much more energy, all of the above approach we've taken toward energy, and the approach we've taken toward value-added agriculture and bioscience, the Future Fund grant that I gave to BioWorks, and so that whole package, that alone, outside of all the other stuff we talked about, to keep South Dakota strong, safe, and free. I'm excited about the vision we laid out for South Dakota because I think we have some very exciting opportunities, and we're just on the front end of it. So I'm excited about the potential for South Dakota and to have the opportunity to stay at the helm for 4 more years to see that vision and the vision that Christie started 6 years ago, quite frankly. Like I said in the State of the State address, she named cybersecurity as the next big industry in South Dakota, and we followed through on that. And like you said, that industry has grown by 350%, and the second leading state in the nation on that. That set the table for where we're at now, and now we're going to get to work.
You know, I would say in addition to the National Security Initiative, we heard in the State of the State, of course, about property tax, and I said a year ago, there's nobody in this building who knows more about property tax or has spent more time working on it than the governor. Clearly, you have a vision there. In the area of public safety, we have the new prison being built and the Correctional Rehabilitation Task Force, of course, Operation Prairie Thunder. I think we've seen a lot of significant activity on that front, very important in terms of the future vision for the state. Even in education, that was a portion of the speech where there hasn't been as much conversation prior to that, and maybe is not as much awareness about all that's going on in the reading and math area that Dr. Graves has been leading. You know, I said when I introduced the governor the other day, he often will tell us good policy makes good politics. And I have worked in the governor's office through legislative sessions now 12 times, 12 years. I don't know, I'd have to think about it. And our process this year is not different. We're not in the back room plotting about what this guy's gonna do or that guy's gonna do. It's the same process. We're looking at the bills on their merits. We're thinking about how we can move the state forward. We're working with legislators. I have actually not seen the campaigning infiltrate the legislative process so far to the extent that we thought it might. It's early in session, but I've had legislators mention that to me too. I mean, I saw one legislator the other day quoted saying that the governor's speech was more policy specific than maybe any state of the state that he could remember in his time here. So we're not really focused on that. I would say too, you know, I ran a winning campaign for governor as a campaign manager. I've done that before. You decide what your theory of the case is. You decide what your message is gonna be, and you try to convince people of that message, really regardless of what's going on. And so the other candidates are all gonna have their view of the world, and they're gonna try to shoehorn whatever's going on into that view of the world, and that's how you run a campaign. That's fine. But we're not really focused on that.
I'm gonna give Bob one last question here, and then if any of you have outstanding questions, you can feel free to message me and I'll get back to you.
Governor, Bob Mercer, Keller Land News. You know, yesterday you were present for the State of the Tribes address, and then later you met with the tribal leadership in this room. What was your takeaway from the address, and what did you talk about in the room here in private?
Yeah, well, I thought it was probably as good a State of the Tribes address that I've heard. It was short, it was to the point. She made the points of concern that she brought forward. And then we came in here for the meeting, and it was really an encouraging day all in all, because it started much sooner than that. I think one of the first meetings I had in the day when I stepped out of my office, and there were members of the Oglala Sioux tribe, member of their councilman standing out in the rotunda, and we had a great conversation then. Took some pictures and just had casual conversation throughout the day with different members of different tribes. It was kind of an impromptu, we had not planned the meeting we had here. And that was encouraging me. I come in, we had set up a meeting with the Rosebud Sioux tribe, because we'd tried to get to the reservation, the Rosebud Sioux tribe, a number of times. They had to cancel one time. We had to cancel another time because of weather. So then we had this meeting, and we ended up with 6 tribal chairmen in here and tribal authorities from 8 of the 9 tribes. And we had this room, I think there were 50-some people in here. Yeah. And we had some real open conversations. And there were things that we were palms up with them as far as some of the concerns, some of the areas that we disagreed on, and we agreed to disagree, and we had more conversation. But as we walked out of the room, we had built a relationship, and I think we'll continue to build on that. So it was a product of just open, honest conversation, and to me, that's what this process is all about. And so I felt pretty encouraged at day's end about it.
Thank you guys, appreciate you being here and asking questions. Like I said, send me a message if you have outstanding questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, gals.
These are new.
And that wraps up this week's briefing from Governor Larry Rhoden, live from the state capitol in Pierre. He had a lot to say about property taxes. There were a lot of questions from reporters about property taxes. There was an interesting thing there about the impact on renters and concerns that renters have that property owners will pass on the tax increase, or whatever they decide will pass on to them, and they'll have to pay more, they'll have to pay higher rates. He did say that somebody did ask about town halls and the benefits of the property tax town halls across the state. He did say that those were very eye-opening and did help them in setting the proposal that he put together for this legislative session. There was another question about his feelings on what's happening with Kristi Noem, former governor of South Dakota. And he mainly said that he supports her and that he knows that she is not going to back down. Let's see. He did address rural health, the value of community input in crafting his proposals. He also talked about tribal concerns and his takeaways from yesterday's State of the Tribes address, which we did live stream here on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our website. He found the whole address very encouraging, and his interactions with tribal members afterwards, he found that to be very encouraging. The governor will continue holding these weekly updates throughout the 2026 legislative session as lawmakers tackle bills and debate key issues facing the state. We do have a reporter at the Capitol today, and tonight he's going to be giving us some updates about his findings from today's events in the legislative session. Thanks for joining us this morning. For continuing coverage from the Capitol, stay with us on air, on our website, KOTATV.com, and on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Again, thanks for joining me, and have a great day.